What's up? Justin Spears coming at you. You're listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast on Apple, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms, along with Tucson.com. It's March, which means it's a busy time of year in Southern Arizona and U of A Sports. For all the latest in the Old Pueblo sports scene, please be sure to buy a digital subscription to Tucson.com. It's a deal you don't want to miss out on. In addition to the plethora of sports happening around town, this weekend will also bring the Tucson Festival of Books to the University of Arizona campus. This annual tradition brings out authors and writers and visitors from all parts of the world. And one of the most recognizable visitors this week will be Dan Patrick, host of the Dan Patrick Show on Fox Sports Radio. Dan's also a former ESPN anchor, and he's been in a lot of Adam Sandler movies. When it comes to the best of the best in sports broadcasting, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone better than Dan Patrick. And Dan was kind enough to join me on the Wildcast podcast this week, which also aired on my radio show, Spears and Ali, on ESPN Tucson. And Dan promoted his book, The Occasionally Accurate Annals of Football, the NFL's greatest players, plays, scandals, and screw-ups, plus stuff we totally made up. If you like what you hear, please leave the Wildcast podcast a rating and a comment on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to us on. We greatly appreciate it. Now, let's get to the interview with the man himself, the world famous Dan Patrick. Justin Spears here with the Wildcast podcast and also Spears and Ali on ESPN Tucson 1490 AM and the Spears and Ali podcast have an absolute legend joining us. We have Dan Patrick, who will be in Tucson for the Tucson Festival of Books. He will be at a keynote presentation. He will be promoting his book and talking with anyone who is interested in reading it and being a part of the discussion. The book is called The Occasionally Accurate Annals of Football, the NFL's greatest players, plays, scandals, and screw-ups, plus stuff we totally made up. And Dan is here to talk about all of it. Dan, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
And you wrote the book with comedian / screenwriter Joel Cohen. What can you tell us about the relationship that you have with him and also the book itself?
Well, Joel writes for The Simpsons, and that caught my eye because obviously that's as well written as any show, and it's been on the air for such a long period of time. He's very creative. And when we first talked, he wanted to have me on to play the role of an announcer with a rock skipping contest with Homer Simpson. And I thought, okay, I think I could do that. And then the more we talked, the more he had kind of sports questions, football related questions. And we probably spent 30 minutes talking to one another. Next thing I know, he said, maybe we should write a book. And then I go, yeah, sure. I didn't even think about it. And then he came back and he said, I got some notes here. And then I wrote some notes back to him, and then he wrote some notes, and I wrote some notes. Then all of a sudden, he said, I think we can make this into a book. I said, well, good luck. And then he came back and he goes, we're going to make this into a book. And I said, okay. And he then had some friends who wanted to get involved, like guys who don't have the opportunity of a podcast or a radio show. And, Andy Richter, who was with Conan O'Brien as his sidekick for decades, he had something that he wanted to say. So we just sort of said, if you have something, you want to have fun, come on in. If it's accurate, great. If not, that's okay. We can still have some fun at the expense of the NFL.
How much of it is totally made up, as referenced in the title of the book?
There are things that are written, and I don't know if they're true or not. But they certainly sound like they could be true. I mean, we have fun. We have, there's some obvious ones that, we talk about Kenny Stabler's breakfast that he would eat, the former Raider quarterback. Obviously, he didn't have that kind of breakfast, but we do poke fun at some players, some teams, and it's meant to be lighthearted. Most of your NFL books are very serious. It's about the gladiators, the masters of intimidation, all of that stuff. And we're like, nah, let's have some fun at this because after all, it is entertainment. We take it way too serious, but we had some fun at the expense of those kind of fans.
How many books have you been a part of? Is this your first one?
No, I did a Sports Center book with Keith Olbermann. We kind of gave kind of wide ranging back in the 90s. And it was about some tips on being a sportscaster. We had questions, players who should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's kind of wide ranging, but yeah, that was my first book. I did another book called Outtakes, which was the column that would be in ESPN, the magazine. And then we just expanded a lot of the interviews that I did, which were meant to be sort of offhanded comments or topics that maybe these athletes and coaches don't normally get. And so this is technically my third.
Mhm. And how did you and Joel first meet? I know he's mentioned the Simpsons connection, but how did you guys first become friends? What was that first interaction like?
I just think it was a conversation, and it was supposed to be about The Simpsons, and then it morphed into something more than that. And then he was going through the writer's strike, and I talked to him a lot then, and because he wasn't writing for The Simpsons, and we were trying to put this book together. What did we put in? What did we take out? And is there any problems that we're going to have down the road with any of these athletes or former athletes? And so it just became sort of a everyday or every other day kind of conversation that you would have with a friend.
Okay. We have Dan Patrick joining us here on the Wildcast podcast and also the Spears and Ali podcast, also airing live on ESPN Tucson, 1490 AM. So I'm just curious, everything that you've done in your career as a sportscaster, you've been in movies, you also have written some books. What is the proudest project that you've ever been a part of?
I have a broadcasting school at Full Sail University, and your degree is in sportscasting. And that is the proudest thing I've ever been involved in because you're actually changing somebody's life. You come there, we want to prepare you to get a job when you get out, not an internship. In most universities, you get your degree, there's no guarantee with anything. They're not necessarily helping you get a job. We tell our students that we're here. There's an umbilical cord attached. We're going to help you get jobs. You may not be in front of the microphone, in front of the camera, but you're going to get a great shot. You're going to be ahead of everybody with your experience and what we teach you. That is something that we have over 200 students who've been placed in media jobs around the country. And we've only been doing this for 5 years. That is something that every single time I hear that a graduate has a job makes my day. Never take it for granted because you're giving them the opportunity to do this for a living. And it's a really, really difficult field to try to establish yourself.
What is a common piece of advice that you give to someone at Full Sail or just a broadcaster who's interested in becoming better and they ask you the question, what advice do you have to give me as I continue this career?
Be humble, be hungry. That's it. Because
Simple as that.
yes, you have to be able to get along with people. Nobody wants a diva. They want to make sure that you're hungry. You want to be great. You want to continue to be great, but also you're a good team player. Be humble, be hungry.
You were also asked to host The Price is Right. Is that correct? But you declined. What can you tell us about that process?
Well, that was, I believe, 1999. And I got a call, and it was an executive producer who said, "Hey, would you like to host Price is Right?" And I knew who the executive producer was because he had told me about, I was up for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah.
I was told by this executive producer that I got the job. And I flew out to LA, and he said, I'm going to have you do this, but I got to find a job for Regis Philbin because Regis wanted to do Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So I come back home and I say to my wife, I said, I got offered this job, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but they got to get a job for Regis Philbin. And she goes, okay. I didn't hear back from the executive producer. And then all of a sudden, I think on the cover of TV Guide or some magazine, I see that Regis Philbin is going to host Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Never heard from the producer until I heard from the producer. He said, hey, would you like to host Price is Right? I said, I think we've been down this road before. Yeah. And he goes, no, it's your job. You can have it. But they just want to see you on the set. They want to see, because you're tall, how that works with everything that they put on screen and all the games that they play in Price is Right. And I said, okay. They had cleared it with Bob Barker. that he was signed off on me being the host. I go, okay. They said, but we want to build a set in San Antonio. I was covering the NBA Finals. We're going to build a set when you go to San Antonio just so we can take some pictures and we can see how you look on the set. I said, okay. I said, what's the salary? And they said, well, we can't tell you the salary until you agree to take the job. So I said, I'm not going to take the job. I wasn't ready to leave ESPN.
Yeah.
And I was flattered because let's make a deal. They had reached out. Price is Right. Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Might have been one other game show. I'm not The Closer, something like that. I got in. I must have gotten into like this potential game show host Rolodex where, hey, do you want to host this? Do you want to host that? And then I eventually said no. I would have host. Oh, Jeopardy was the other one.
Yeah.
So I was up for the job. I was flown to L.A. and Alex Trebek, they weren't sure if he was going to re-sign with Jeopardy. And then the head of Sony at the time said, well, it's your job if he doesn't decide to stay on and sign a contract extension. So I'm like, okay. And and that's a job that I would have loved. Jeopardy, I would have loved. And Alex ended up signing a contract extension. They created Sports Jeopardy on the same set. And we did, I think, 100 episodes of that and got a chance to sit down with Alex. We went to dinner one night and, I realized that I wasn't getting it, but then I didn't want it if he still wanted to do it. It wasn't one of those where I go, gosh, he's coming back. I'm like, no, I'm glad you're coming back because he's so great at it. So those are all the game shows that I've been up for.
I love Sports Jeopardy because it makes me feel better about myself as opposed to when I watch normal Jeopardy. When I watch Sports Jeopardy, I clean out the categories. But you also got into Hollywood. You became really good friends with Adam Sandler. And Adam Sandler, over the last couple years, I would say, has been a very popular figure in Tucson, Arizona. Has visited his sister out here, played pickup basketball at the University of Arizona. How did that relationship get started? And what's your favorite Adam Sandler movie that you've been a part of?
It kind of happened by accident. I was at a Knicks game and I ended up running into him, and he was talking about me being in a movie. And I said, look, if you ever need, somebody to be in a movie from ESPN, you let me know. And he said, you're going to be in my next movie. Well, his next movie was Little Nicky. And then the movie after that was Longest Yard. And then he said, you're going to be in my next movie. You're going to be a police officer and you're going to have a mustache. And I was a police officer with a mustache in Longest Yard. And I'm at the beginning of the movie where I try to arrest him for stealing his girlfriend's car, Courtney Cox. And then after that, Sandman put me in. I think I've been in 20 movies, but he always writes a little cameo for me and carve out a couple of days to visit him on set, play some basketball, and shoot a scene. He's become a very good friend and very generous when it comes to handing out movie roles.
Is that the only time you've had a mustache and also been in a police outfit?
No. I think I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry. I had a mustache. I was a police officer. I think three or four times I've had a mustache. I played Abe Lincoln in a movie, a Sandler movie, The Ridiculous Six. And so I had a beard there. I think he likes just kind of dressing me up and making me look even, more ridiculous. And he's done a good job at that.
So Dan, I don't know if you've ever been to Tucson, Arizona. What have you heard about this city, and what are you looking forward to most when you get out here?
Well, I think there's a Mexican restaurant that I'm supposed to visit. I don't know the name of that, but my producer
Is it Minidito?
I don't know. I don't know where my producer is, but
Okay.
He said, I got a restaurant suggestion for you. But my brother lives in Scottsdale, so I'm well versed in. I spent a couple of years in Phoenix growing up. Spent a lot of time in Scottsdale, baseball, spring training, playing golf. But I don't think I might have been to Tucson once in all my travels there. So it'll be a new experience for me coming in for a couple of days.
When you think of Tucson, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Oh, I guess basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably basketball. Because what's the name of the Mexican restaurant in Tucson? It's a woman's name.
Oh, trying to think of
All right, see if you
who it
can
could be.
find it, Paulie.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. No, so where were we?
We just talk about when you think of Tucson,
Oh, yeah.
Arizona, you think of college basketball and the Arizona
Yeah.
Wildcats.
Yeah, they always frustrate me. I viewed U of A sort of like the Chargers in the NFL. Like I
That's
always
my favorite.
go, this
Yeah.
is the year. I'm picking them this year, and then all of a sudden they bow out, and I go, I'm not doing it again. I'm not pick. U of A could be undefeated. I'm still not going to pick them until they prove me wrong, because I would always buy in. I'd be the East Coast guy who's watching West Coast basketball. Like I wanted to make sure that I was watching, so I didn't go, I don't know how good that team is, but I was watching. I was like,
Yeah.
they got bigs, they have everything, all this stuff. And then they would find the banana peel, usually early in the tournament.
Yep. Dan, as a Chargers fan, I
Oh.
can totally attest to everything that you're saying.
Yeah. All those years I would buy in. I'd be like, this is the year. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, nope, this is not the year.
So Dan, not only do us being sportscasters, not only is that a common thing that we share, but noticed that you lost your father at a very young age. You were 24, I believe, when you lost your dad. I was 23 when I lost my dad. And my dad is the biggest hero, inspiration that I have in my life. What kind of relationship did you have with your dad, and what does he mean to you?
Well, I just got to the age where you start to know your parents, where you're not a son or a daughter. Now you're kind of on equal footing where you can have grown up conversations. And I just remember he was diagnosed with cancer and they gave him 6 months to live, and he lived 6 months. And, you sort of see that in front of your eyes where somebody's wasting away in front of you. I mean, I still haven't gotten over it, and it's been a long, long time.
Yeah.
Been 40 years, but it's always there. It's going to be there because he missed out on everything. My career, my wife, my kids, all of that, my first grandchild. And, so that's usually what I think of, that he was very generous, and he wore the same pair of shoes for 15 years. He never spent money on himself. Any money that he made, if we needed something sports wise, we got it. He was there at every game he could possibly be at. He just didn't take care of himself. He was a smoker. And that generation, they smoked. And he smoked Camel non-filters and died of lung cancer.
I know you're a busy man. You have to go here very shortly. As a sportscaster, a man who's considered you're a Hall of Famer. You're on the Mount Rushmore of sportscasters, and it's an absolute honor to have you here, Dan. I'm wondering, as someone who's been in the business for so long and has been so successful, who inspired you to get into your career?
Wait a minute, hold on. Do we have the name, Paulie?
If I remember right, it's Mi Nidito restaurant.
Minidito.
Minidito.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the restaurant that Paulie told me to
It's legit.
That means my little nest in Spanish, and it's popular because Bill Clinton, Jim Furyk, a lot of celebrities have eaten there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
Celebrities.
Paulie. Yeah.
And Dan Patrick.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see if we can squeeze it in. So, what was the question, Justin?
Who is your biggest inspiration as a sportscaster? Because growing up, I've always looked up to you, to Stuart Scott. Even recently, Dan Le Batard is a guy that I strive to be. I'm wondering your position. Who got you into sportscasting? Who was your biggest inspiration?
Oh, I always appreciated Keith Jackson calling college football games because he sounded like the sport. Vin Scully, that voice, that was baseball. And so I'm into the audio portion of all of this. That's why I love radio. I was never big on TV. I love radio. Al Michaels was somebody. Brent Musburger was somebody. Bob Costas, Bryant Gumbel. They're just way too many that you just. And all I wanted to do was try to be professional, try to have a long shelf life. Didn't want to be gimmicky. Didn't want to have a shtick. Didn't want to do hot takes. Any of that. I wanted to do this for a career. And I tell my students that you can be flavor of the month. You could be somebody popular for, a year or two, but have staying power. Because then I've been doing this for over 40 years. But I set out to do this. I didn't have a plan B. That's another thing is sometimes your best motivator is you, because I didn't know what I was going to do if I didn't do this. There were no other options. This was it. And therefore I was going to succeed.
Going back to the book real quick, is there a conspiracy theory in football that you absolutely believe in, even if it's not really proven true?
Well, I don't think games are fixed, if you mean that, because
Sure.
I have people who always say, oh, those referees had it in for us. I don't think that, well, I don't believe that. I think it's a convenient out for people just to say, that's they don't like us. We liked that almost being the victims here. Nobody believed in us. But I don't have anything where I go, that there's seems to be some validity to that. Now the Patriots, do I feel like they were always trying to get an edge? Yes. And they did. But when Belichick, when he's asked, hey, Spygate, do we really need to do that? And he tells the owner, yeah, we got like a 1%, better chance of winning. Yeah. And the owner's like, you're an idiot. Like, we risked all of this for 1%. But sometimes that 1% is you just won a Super Bowl. You go back to Malcolm Butler with the interception against Seattle. That's it. That's the difference between a win and a loss. That's a difference between Brady with another Super Bowl or Russell Wilson with back-to-back Super Bowls. And Pete Carroll with another. Like, it changes lives, and it's one play. It's one moment. It's one little thing there. And that's what's always fascinated me with sports. We play all these games, and it can come down to one little thing in the final game, the final minute. And it decides everything that happened the previous 6 months. And that's why sports is so great, because you can't script it. You can never script what we do every single day where you go, oh my God, that happened. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of times when we go, this happened, and you'd go, well, that's not possible. But it is in sports. If we watched it in a movie, we'd go, well, nobody's going to believe that. Yeah. But then we see it, and in our real world, in our vacuum, when we go, I'll be damned. Look at that. That is crazy. And it feels like that's a natural everyday occurrence, or every other day where we go, oh my God, did you hear about this?
That is Dan Patrick, host of the Dan Patrick Show. He will be in Tucson this week for the Tucson Festival of Books, promoting the occasionally accurate annals of football, the NFL's greatest players, plays, scandals, and screw-ups, plus stuff we totally made up. Was a co-author of the book, with Joel Cohen, comedian / screenwriter. And if you're interested in attending the Festival of Books and going to his presentation, it will be on Saturday in the Koffler Room, 218, from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. And there will also be a signing portion of the presentation as well. Dan, it was an absolute honor to have you part of the podcast. We appreciate you, and welcome to Tucson.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Thanks again for having me on, Justin.
Thank you, Dan.